Well, let's take a closer look in the meantime at the idea that Netanyahu and his team have been floating this so-called voluntary migration from Gaza. Here's what Peace Now, an Israeli NGO, had stated earlier. When life in a certain place is made impossible by bombing and siege, there is nothing, quote, voluntary about people leaving. That brings us to the point of forced displacement. International law and the Geneva Conventions define it as the involuntary or coerced movement of people away from their homes or home regions. According to Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, individual or mass forced transfers from occupied territories are prohibited. Mass forced displacement is considered a crime against humanity. A reminder that both the United States and Israel are signatories to the Geneva Conventions. Well, let's bring in Ralph Wilde. He's a professor of international law at University College London. He's also served as a senior counsel on behalf of the Arab League in the International Court of Justice and has argued that Israel's presence on occupied Palestinian territories itself is illegal. Professor, I want to focus on this idea of voluntary movement, which is not against international law, but forced displacement obviously is. How voluntary is flight from a conflict when homes and infrastructure have been decimated? And how do these two plans that we've been hearing about, this one to concentrate people in the ruins of Rafah, or potentially to push people out beyond the borders of Gaza, how do these two plans fit into that?
Thank you. Well, I should just begin by saying I'm speaking here today in my personal capacity only. So we have to start with the illegality of Israel's presence in and of itself. Israel has no right even to be in Gaza or in the West Bank, and therefore everything Israel does there, because its presence is illegal, is also illegal, including the way it treats the Palestinian people at the moment, and in any implementing any of these plans for forced displacement, whether within or outside of Gaza. Any such action is part of a presence which is itself illegal as a violation of the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people, and also as an unlawful use of force and aggression. So that's our starting point. Then also there are other rules of international law that Israel would be breaching, rules which are concerned with not whether Israel's presence is illegal, which is the case, as I've explained, but rather the way Israel conducts itself as part of that presence. And there, indeed, we have very clear rules of international law which prohibit the forced transfer of the population within Gaza, or indeed also the West Bank. Not only transfer outside of that territory, but also forced transfer within it. Such forced transfer is illegal. It's illegal as a grave violation of the laws of war, and is therefore both a violation of international law on the part of Israel as a state, but also a war crime as a matter of individual criminal responsibility on the part of all those individuals involved in it, from the soldiers implementing it all the way up to the leadership adopting it as a policy. Also, because it's part of a widespread and systematic attack directed against the Palestinian people, it is also a crime against humanity, again at the level of state responsibility and individual criminal responsibility. So finally, also, it is genocide. It is part of the existing ongoing process of intending to inflict on the Palestinian people conditions of life calculated to destroy them in whole or in part. So essentially, war crimes, crimes against a war crime, a crime against humanity, and the crime of genocide at both an individual criminal level and at the level of the state.
Professor, you've outlined a number of crimes there. Thank you for doing that. I want to focus specifically, just for the rest of our conversation, on this idea of a forced transfer, because, for instance, the Israeli military is stating that Palestinians are being displaced within Gaza for their own protection. So they're characterizing this as an evacuation. Is there any kind of international law implications for that? Can something that's called an evacuation not then be a forced transfer?
No, because it's not consensual. The clue is in the term forced. The Palestinian people have no choice in this movement. It is coerced. More generally, of course, the only threat to them and their existence in the places from which they are being displaced is Israel itself.
I want to ask you, too, about this idea of choice. So if Israel, for instance, establishes this so-called humanitarian zone, which sounds an awful lot more like a concentration zone in the ruins of Rafah, if they set that up and you are a Palestinian and you have the option of either going there and being trapped inside or leaving Gaza, is that a form of voluntary displacement or is that forced displacement?
No, it's forced displacement because that isn't a choice that is made freely. Many rules of international law are essentially common sense. And I think anyone watching this broadcast can appreciate that in conditions like the conditions that the people of the Palestinian people in Gaza face today, there is no, the concept of free choice is a lie. And moreover, the constraints on Palestinian freedom are caused by Israel itself, not by some other actor. So Israel is creating the very conditions that remove from the Palestinian people the ability to make decisions freely about where they are to be located.
Ralph Wilde, Professor of International Law at University College London, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise with us here on the Al Jazeera News Hour, sir.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.